Hi, and welcome to today's video where I will be talking about dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity within projects. Now, within this video, what I'm going to cover is really understanding what uncertainty is in your projects, a degree, how you can grasp the ambiguity and manage that through your project. Some of the causes of what uncertainty, ambiguity, happens within projects, and some basic strategies to mitigate uncertainty and how you can approach and resolve ambiguity. However, I also will be covering how you can embrace uncertainty, ambiguity to give you opportunities as a project manager to move things forward. So, without delay, let's crack on with the first area. So, uncertainty and ambiguity within project is very, very common, and it will always happen. Now, in the real world, there's no such thing as a perfect documented project, which gives you the clear scope and outline, which then you will deliver from point A all the way to the end without it changing. It does not happen. There's no such thing. And if anybody ever tells you that, they are lying, and it's not true. And I'll tell you, with all my experiences, whatever I've documented initially and what we've delivered at the end has always had some degree of uncertainty, ambiguity, and has changed. So, really, first one is understanding uncertainty in projects. Now, as a definition, uncertainties are the unknown elements or risks that can impact project outcomes. So things like, types are like marketing, technological, environmental, and organizational changes that you just cannot control. Now, uncertainty are things that will happen, without you knowing, or are things that you cannot control within your project and have to be managed effectively to make sure. Now, a good example is really, let's use a construction project, for example, where they're facing uncertainty due to unexpected weather patterns. Now, you can't control weather, you just have to manage it and, best manage your project to move that forward. Next is really ambiguity. Now, the definition here of ambiguity is vague or unclear aspects of a project that lack clarity. Now, it's like a parent telling a child to do something which is not clear, instructing the child, they're not able to deliver. Parent gets cross, but what you don't realize is that actually you weren't very clear about what you were asking, so therefore the child was unable to do that. So there's a prime example in real life, but in projects it's the same thing, not just with child but with grown adults and your work colleagues. Degree of unclear or vague instructions leaves people with uncertainty, which means that they're not quite sure what to do and are guessing. Now, the areas where you have ambiguity are such in your project scope, your requirements, your stakeholder expectations. If you don't have a clear scope, you don't have a requirements or a stakeholder expectation, you don't quite know what to deliver, creates massive ambiguity, and you are guessing. So let's go into some of the causes of uncertainty and ambiguity. And really, a lot of the things that causes are external factors like changing market dynamics, new regulations, global events, management changes. There's all sorts of things that can affect uncertainty and ambiguity. Now, those are, and the ones I just spoke about are more external. Internal factors are like scope changes within the business, unclear objectives, teams are misaligned. Those are key areas where you will find uncertainty, ambiguity. Now, external factors, I would say, are pretty much out of your control and you have to manage, but internal factors, you can control that, such as your scope changes, unclear objective, you can define those. So how do you next, really, what strategies can you use to mitigate uncertainty? Now, first one is risk management. Identify, you assess, and you prioritize your risks. That will, take the ambiguity out. You've assessed your risk, you've understood it, you've either accepted it, you've either mitigated it, or you have decide not to move forward with it. So that really has some risk management planning around that, which is really good. Contingency planning is another one. Having backup plans in place is really good. You can't have a backup plan for everything, but having some sort of backup plan of every phase or something, saying, okay, well, if you can foresee some of those uncertainties, and making sure that you can plan as best as possible. And you're not going to plan for everything, but you'll plan as best as possible as you can. And another suggestion would be having an adaptable project team. Now, sprint, the sprint agile buzzword is really what you want: a team that reacts as and when required, so that you can change the team, the strategy to meet your requirements. So those are things. But again, communication is another one where you can mitigate uncertainty and that ambiguity by being really clear about how you do that. Now, next one is really, how do you approaches to resolve ambiguity? Now, uncertainty is one thing, but ambiguity, I think, is one of the biggest killers in project management. Now, really, with so much ambiguity in a lot of the projects I've done, you'll find that you are constantly changing your scope, etc. But however, to avoid that, there are some clear approaches you can take. Firstly, is clear documentation. Your detailed project charters, scope statements, whatever, as a baseline. That will change. At least it gives you the foundation of what you started from, and as things evolve, you use change control to manage that throughout. Communication is another one. Regular updates, check-ins with your stakeholders, your engineers, your people on the ground, whoever's doing the work for you, will make sure that you are regular, keeping updated, and therefore you are reducing the amount of ambiguity for people's actions and what you're expecting them to do, but be very clear and be very precise. And then the other ones is, some clarity tools, such as you can use your racing matrix, you can use a project plan, whatever you want to define where people sit. And if you're not familiar with RACI, so RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consultant, Informed. It's basically a grid where you put your tasks and you define who's responsible, who's accountable, who you consult, and who you inform, and that gives you some degree of accountability and takes the ambiguity out of who does what, when, and what their roles and responsibilities are. And as part of your project, really defining your roles and responsibilities is one key stage there. However, uncertainty, ambiguity are not the end of the world, are not all negative things. There are silver linings here. Some of these uncertainties, ambiguity, bring opportunities within your project. You should assess, i.e., using your risk management tools so that you can understand those. Being adaptable and be resilient can turn challenges into opportunities. Don't just look at challenges and say, "Oh, that's the end of the world. It's going to be all negative." Sometimes a supplier could throw a curveball in and think, actually, that brings a lot of value to a project. It could save time. It could save cost. There are opportunities. Now, I've had this where, customers suddenly had a major environmental change within their business, which meant from a delivery perspective, our scope was reduced. Our delivery times were actually increased because of their delays, which meant that we were able to deliver more with less resource in more time and with more time in our hands. So it can benefit you. It's not all doom and gloom when it comes to uncertainty and ambiguity. So in summary, uncertainty is just things, external factors that you just cannot control, but you need to make sure that you are managing through risk. Ambiguity is one of the things I would say is a major killer of your projects, but make sure that you are being clear. Remove the vaguity around what your scope is, what you're supposed to deliver. Keep that communication channel open with your team on a regular basis so they know what they're doing, when they're doing it, and how they are doing it. That way you are taking the ambiguity out. But don't forget, you can embrace uncertainty and ambiguity as an opportunity within your projects, because it can add value. It's not always negative. There are pros to it, and I think you should look at uncertainty and ambiguity in both ways to help your project delivery. I hope that was helpful, and thank you for listening.